Hey, I'm Greg. Hi. Some of you saw me yesterday. Today we're going to talk about cloud networking. There's me from Red Hat. I've got Scott Drennan here and Lokesh, both from Nuage Networks. We're going to talk about cloud networking in ManageIQ. Talk about some of the work that went into modeling, show a quick demo. And then Scott's going to go over Nuage Networks and what they bring to the table. And also, sort of like what Federico went over with the work that was involved to just ramp up and work with ManageIQ, and then also show a demo of what just the fruition of all that work. Talk a little bit about what's next, and then open it up for questions. So ManageIQ Cloud Networking. This has kind of a long story behind it. And I'm going to start with a tale of John Hardy and the Joe Fitz rule of three. So some of you probably know Joe Fitzgerald as one of the co-founders of ManageIQ. I didn't know him. I worked at Red Hat for a number of years, and then the acquisition of ManageIQ. After that, I joined the ManageIQ team, and shortly thereafter, I went up to Mahwah, actually this building, and we were having a developer discussion, and Joe Fitz happened to be in the office, so we took the opportunity to have him come and talk about what the field was doing, and he's a great talker. I mean, just he captures your attention. As he's talking, though, Jason leans over to me. I'm going to put this one on Jason again, under the bus. Jason leans over and goes, "Joe Fitz is a genius, but beware of the rule of three." I'm like, what are you talking about? He said, Joe Fitz will come to you and he'll say something. He'll say, "I was out in the field, this great feature, we're going to do this thing." Like, okay, he said it once. Don't ignore that he said it once, but don't do anything. Okay, a couple months go by, he'll come to you again and say, "Great feature, same feature, heard it out in the field, next biggest thing. We're going to do this great feature." Okay, he said it twice. Make sure you remember he said it twice, but don't do anything. He comes to you a third time, and he says, "Great feature, same feature." He says it a third time. Okay, this is for real. This is when you add the feature to the application. Because at that point, it's going to hit the market, and it's going to go bananas. So John Hardy came to me and said, "Cloud networking." What? Well, we have cloud networking. We have OpenStack. We already collect this stuff from Neutron. We're fine. But then I remembered the rule of three. Okay, well, that's one. A couple months go by. John Hardy comes to me again. Yeah, this cloud networking thing. We really got to start talking about it. I hear people talking about this Nuage stuff. Like, all right, that's two. And then he finally came to me again and said, "What we need to do," I was like, oh, this is sounding concrete now. We need to figure out how to get Neutron as a first-class manager type in ManageIQ, because that will be the basis for figuring out how to pull in Nuage Networks as a real provider. So, all right, he has a plan. So we start talking about it. We start involving Scott, Lokesh, the whole team from Nuage. We had an entire meeting over in Raleigh, pulled a number of people in, and started the process of talking about what it meant to do cloud networking ManageIQ. This was not a short process. We had some capabilities in place, but it all centered around what we could currently do with Neutron in OpenStack. and it was fairly limited. What it ended up with was this model. I don't expect you to understand it. I just want you to see it. And this isn't even done. So what we've managed to do is at least capture what Neutron can tell us about cloud networking that we could overlap with what we can get from Nuage, or at least that we could understand from Nuage at this moment in time. So this is obviously, there's lots of lines and boxes and stuff. What's more interesting is a demo. So I'm going to try that. So Ladislav put this demo together. I'm going to read some notes as it's going through because I'm not going to remember where he's pointing and what he's clicking on. But the first thing we're going to see is the new UI that Dan talked about with the side tab over there. So moving the top nav to the side nav. And one of the other new things is the networking tab. So we can see all the different pieces of the networking providers that would be available, but we're going to jump right into the topology view. So we've seen a lot of images of this. It's a little discombobulating to see this pop up for the first time. But what this shows is 3 different cloud providers with all of their network information all connected together. What's really interesting about this is that there's 2 tags in there. And as Ladislav's moving these things around to make it a little bit clearer to see, that bottom tag is a dev tag, so a dev environment. And a lot of you know from ManageIQ, tags are just, you can do whatever you want with them. In this case, the bottom tag means this is my dev environment. So all of the things that are associated with that tag across those 3 different providers are in a dev environment. And that top tag, as he moves up there, oh, he's circling the dev environment. The top tag is the prod environment. So all those pieces across the different providers are what's running in production. But what he's going to show next is drilling into just one provider. So he's saying, here's the 3, here's 3 different providers across these different environments. But what does it look like if we just want to see OpenStack? So OpenStack has its own provider-specific topology view. And again, it's showing everything. So it pops up and there's lots of things going around. So let's filter it down to just secure VMs and subnets. So you can see all the VMs sitting on one subnet right now, except for one. Sorry, there's one straggler off in the corner. So we'll add in security groups, and we can see how the different VMs are grouped, into their security settings. And then what we'll do is enable cloud networks. So now we can see how the different VMs through their subnets are networked together. And now we can enable network routers. And what's interesting about this now is one of those routers is actually a public gateway to the public network. So one of those subnets is responsible for all of the floating IPs that VMs will be attached, or that VMs can utilize. Also, you can see the dynamic nature of Topology View. Boing. I really want that sound in there. Every time you click on boing. So now we'll bring up the floating IPs, and now you can see that subnet with all the floating IPs coming off of it, and which VMs are using which floating IPs. So we can see all this in one view. Trying to bring a little sanity to the view by moving some things around, but and now if we hide a few of the pieces, now you can see just the linkage of VMs to their specific floating IPs. All right, so hide all the things and just show cloud tenants. And now we can see which VMs are in which cloud tenants. And in this particular case, we have one cloud tenant that has all the VMs. If we had multiples, you'd see VMs under different tenants. And that's it. So I'm going to hand it over to Scott. I think. Talk about Nuage.
Cool. Thanks, Greg. Is this working? Maybe, maybe not. We can try it there. Oh, I didn't turn it off. But, can you hear me back there? Not so much? All right. Yeah, it's on. Maybe that other mic was off for a reason. Trying to resuscitate it. So, as Greg said, I'm Scott from Nuage. We started working on this with Greg and John and Jason and Lattice back late last year, I guess, working through a bunch of the modeling and then working to get the cloud network framework in place for the provider, and since then we've been implementing. But one of the points that Greg mentioned was that we were really excited about doing this, and I thought I would take a minute or two to talk about why ManageIQ is exciting for us. So what Nuage Networks does is policy-driven virtualized networking. So we can do networking for anything from physical servers to containers to virtual machines, connect them all together, and allow you to set common policy across all of those different things. So if you've got some containers in OpenShift that should be able to talk to certain VMs in OpenStack but not other VMs, you can do that. If you've got certain physical servers that should be accessible to a specific set of OpenStack or VMware or CloudStack virtual machines, then you can do that. But we just do the networking piece. We don't try and solve policy globally. We don't try and solve provisioning, introspection, for compute, for storage, for anything else. So one of my coworkers likes to use the analogy of tires. We build really, really, really good tires, but if you don't have a car with an engine in it, then your tires aren't really that useful. So ManageIQ gives us the steering wheel and the gear shift and the brakes that manage the whole car, that lets us build the really good networking tires. So that's where we're trying to get to. And as Greg said, this is the first step on what I hope to be a long road with ManageIQ, adding more and more capabilities, especially as Red Hat uses ManageIQ across more of its portfolio. We've got support for OpenStack today. We've got support for OpenShift today. We're talking to the Rev team about introducing Rev support. So across all of those things, being able to have a common management layer that we can expose our capabilities in and customers can use across multiple platforms is really quite neat. And then there's also the public cloud piece. We've got interconnect into public cloud, so the fact that ManageIQ can also connect into AWS, Azure, and as we saw yesterday, lots of good stuff on the Google side is also useful. So, yeah, marketing slide, but I'll spend 30 seconds on it. So we provide policy and analytics, we provide security, and advanced networking. And it's the advanced networking piece, well, it's the security piece as well, but that we're looking to expose in ManageIQ. In order to provide common networking across multiple platforms, we need to be able to create networks and network policies centrally and then expose them into different components. So expose them into OpenStack, expose them into VMware, expose them into OpenShift. And that's what you're going to see in a minute or two in the demo that Lokesh is going to do of the things that we added on top of the work that Lattice did. So talked about heterogeneous workload. For OpenStack, we extend OpenStack's networking capabilities through Neutron, and we also support multiple OpenStack instances. So being able to have a single cloud networking provider that supplies networking to multiple cloud providers is a thing that starts to become interesting there. Or in the case of OpenStack plus OpenShift, you need to be able to expose the same networks and the same subnets into OpenStack and OpenShift in order to allow them to interconnect and talk to each other. So that's those bullets 2 and 3 there are the work that we've done in this go round, and we'll talk a little bit about futures later. But Rev and Overt is one that we're looking at, public cloud, and also ESXi. So stay tuned. So I'll hand it over to Lokesh to talk a little bit about the work that he and the rest of the team have done to actually make this happen, because they're the ones who have done all of the real work. I've just done a lot of talking and arguing back and forth with Greg and Lattice about what the modeling should look like.
Hello. That's good. Hey, so from where Greg left off, the architecture diagram with a lot of blocks on it was not an easy task to come up with. There were a lot of conversations, a lot of discussions that happened to bring it to that stage. And during these discussions, we figured out that ManageIQ can use some really good tires and can get done with that. So, and we kind of tried to prove that what a network provider can bring to ManageIQ and how ManageIQ can leverage that. So once we were on, once Red Hat was on board, we figured out what can we do. Then brings us to the part of how can we do it. So we went in and start understanding the modeling of ManageIQ, how it exists today, what the data models look like, and how Nuage can map to those existing data models and can leverage that. So it was like coming up to speed on what ManageIQ has and how Nuage can fit into that. So once we had that, we needed to know what the code flow looks like. So that's where Ladislaw and Greg came into the picture and helped us a lot to understand what it looks like, and us means Sam, Sunny, and me. We try to figure out what it means to add a new network provider to ManageIQ. So once we have the what can we do and how can we do it, then it comes to like what were we able to do. So here's what we were able to achieve, that we can add a network provider that does not have all the fancy cloud management or anything on it. It's just a network provider, but it can service multiple cloud providers that can be added to ManageIQ. So what we got is like we can do a subnet inventory collection from Nuage and display that on ManageIQ UI. At the same time, we can also create mapping between these providers through a subnet. So the example that we have, like to a ManageIQ, you can add two network providers, one Nuage and one OpenStack Neutron. And a subnet that is created on Nuage can be mapped to a subnet in OpenStack. And the demo that I'll show after this will display that, how it's shown. Oops. Okay. Okay. So here we can see that we can go into the network providers page once it loads up. So in the providers, we'll be able to see both Nuage and OpenStack Neutron in it. And you can see some basic information, that the number of subnet it has and the instances it has. You can drill down further into Nuage and can see the things that we have. So till now we have subnet inventory collection, and you can see the number of subnets there. You can drill down further and see the subnets, the CIDR, the gateway, and you can go into one of the subnets, subnet VSD subnet, and can look into more details of it. There you can see in the managed subnets, it says 0 because it's not mapped to anything yet. So from here, if we go back to the OpenStack network provider and can see the details of it, you can see that it has two subnets as of now. And it has like already zones, tenants. It's not as expensive as Ladislaw had, but it's a smaller version of what is there in OpenStack. So now what we can do is do the mapping between a Nuage subnet and the OpenStack subnets. The subnets here, like it says 2, it gives some more information. So this is the command that is, so this OpenStack is integrated with Nuage. So the Neutron API has extensions to do this, that we can specify a new subnet name, VSDM OpenStack subnet, add it to test network VSD1, and this UUID is of the subnet VSD subnet that can be mapped. So once this subnet is created, this is actually being managed by Nuage, but it will be displayed on OpenStack. So if we go back to the UI of OpenStack and refresh this page, so in the background, EMS refresher is working to get this stuff in here. And if you go back to providers, now we can see that the number of subnets are 3. And we can drill down further into it, see all the summary page that also has the subnets as 3 in it. You can go in and see that the subnet that we just created, the VST managed OpenStack subnet, it starts displaying that there. We can go into details of it, and once we drill down, we can see that the parent subnet is subnet VSD subnet. So this is the actual subnet that was created in VSD, in Nuage, and that managed subnet count is turned to 1 now. So this shows the mapping between a Nuage subnet and an OpenStack subnet. Now we can go to the fancy view of network topology and see the linking there. So so this is much simpler, and we can see the binding of the subnets. It'll move things around. So Sam here is moving these things around so that it's visible much easier. And there you can see the linking between a Nuage subnet and an OpenStack subnet there. And we can have the names in there will be displayed shortly. So you can see that VSD-M OpenStack subnet is mapped to subnet VSD submit. And that's what the mapping was about and how that's done. So this is what we have so far. There are like a lot of things to do, and there's a big roadmap ahead. And I'll let Greg and Scott come back to it and explain that. Just go back to the presentation. Sorry, this mouse is a. Okay. Okay.
All right. So we started out focusing on the key pieces to build a foundation. Obviously, that doesn't give a complete product. So over the next few months, we're going to be focusing on more inventory, adding other clouds, and also starting to look at networking for virtual infrastructure. So I've been talking to some of the overt guys about that. We're also looking at what we can do in VMware. And the other piece that I haven't looked into that much yet, but I'm really excited about, especially seeing some of the presentations earlier, is what can we do in terms of automate and exposing the Nuage primitives into automate, so that pretty much anything you can do from the Nuage UI and the Nuage REST API, you can do from automate. So we've already got auto generation of SDKs in a bunch of different languages. So taking that and turning it into a fog integration is probably next on the list of fun things to do. So there will be more. If you're wondering, this is not in the 4.1 release as of now. We're looking at dropping something into the first errata release, because all of the schema is there and ready to go. It's just merging some of the code and making sure that validation happens and looks good. So, Greg, did you have anything else you wanted to add on the what's next? Did I cover it? Okay. So, yeah, questions?
None, sorry, none from Kevin.
Yeah. So that it's a ML2 plugin, I assume? That
We've actually got
Uh-oh.
We've actually got an ML2 and a monolithic plugin, so depending on what you want to do, you can use either.
There's more. There you go. The other one is what? I guess I'm trying to figure out how. I mean, because I know that Nuage has things that Neutron can't do. Like there's some extra additional functionality. So does that mean you're going to expose that as well with this fog automation thing that you were talking about with the gem?
So originally I was thinking, how do we expose all of this in the UI? And it looked monumental. So yeah, my current thinking is that we're going to expose that through the fog gem into automate and let people extend that way. There are some OpenStack extensions as well that we've got that might be worth exposing, but I think fog is probably the better way to do it, but we need to have some discussions about that to figure it out. Other questions?
Thanks. I couldn't see very well from back here. On those Boing charts, are they showing the status of the network connections as well?
So they are not showing the status of the network connections today, but that's certainly the intent, is that there will be whatever status information can be extracted both from OpenStack and from Nuage.
I'll just also add that I love the fact that they're called Boing charts now.
questions? No?
All right.
Thanks, Scott, Greg, and Lokesh.